What's going on, everyone, and welcome to Movie Emporium's Worst Films of 2020 list. Now, before we begin, as always, if you like what you see on my channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium, hit the notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome, hit that like button and comment below on any video to watch, including this one. So, 2020, we know it's been bad. It's been a rough year. The pandemic hit. The people lost jobs. It was a mess. COVID happened. And it was a year that I almost didn't want to do a top 10 worst list because it's just been such a down year. And on top of that, the year as a whole, when it comes to watching films like I have been able to do, hasn't been that bad. It really hasn't. There are some really bad films that came out this year, but it seems like a long time ago that January and February happened, and here we are in December. This is December 30th when this video posts, and I was actually shocked that I was able to even come up with 10 films. I actually came up with 13, like 3 honorable mentions, but it just, I don't know, I just never felt like I had the spirit of doing a top 10 worst of the year list. It's just, it is what it is, but you know what, it's a fun thing to do. We get to talk about the terrible films each year, and I felt like, you know what, let's go ahead and do a top 10 worst films of the 2020. Like I said, it's not a huge list. It's not my top 10 best of the year, which is a huge list, but it still has some pretty wretched films. So like I said, I have 3 honorable mentions, and the first one is Like a Boss, which had one of the worst performances of the year with Salma Hayek. I had a couple moments where I chuckled in this movie, but this movie was dreadful. But it didn't make my top 10, which is pretty surprising, but the movie was just not really that good. It really wasn't that funny. And even with people like Tiffany Haddish and Rose Byrne, it was a piece of junk. It really was. It was just not a very good film. It was one of those films that came out like the second week of January, and it just proved once again that it was a terrible film. So the next honorable mention is The Rental, which is Dave Franco's movie. A lot more people like this than I thought. I put it in my honorable mentions because it wasn't the worst thing I've ever seen, but it was just kind of bland, boring. You saw where it was going. And it had Alison Brie and Dan Stevens, and it was just a film that didn't really do much for me. And like I said, the reason it's not in the top 10 of worst of the year is just it was not as bad as the other films, but it was still wasn't good. It really wasn't. I was not real happy with it, and I watched it again, and I didn't like it. So that's my second honorable mention. And the third one is a sad thing to talk about because I love Robert Zemeckis, but I did not like the remake of The Witches. I thought it was awful. I thought it was grotesque. I thought it didn't have any of the spirit of Roald Dahl's book, and it just felt there was so much missing. I don't know if it was Octavia Spencer's role performance as the grandmother or it was Anne Hathaway's. I think it was more Anne Hathaway was just doing like cheesy nonsense. But when you're trying to kind of take over a role of somebody like Angelica Houston who ate the scenery like is going out of style, The Witches didn't do anything for me. It was just kind of sad because I was really looking forward to it. Like I said, I love Robert Zemeckis, has done some of my favorite films of all time, but this movie just struck out for me. And like I said, a lot of people liked it, so that's why I put it in my honorable mentions, because it still has some people who enjoyed it. But yeah, didn't like it at all. So there you go. That's my honorable mentions. Like I said, they're not great films. They're pretty terrible, but you know what? They're better than the top 10 that's coming up. So with that said, we'll head into the first film, which is number 10, which is... How do you make a spy thriller boring? How do you just ruin it with the cast that you have, which include like Jessica Chastain and John Malkovich and Colin Farrell, and just not make anything exciting? You create a movie like Ava, and Ava was a film that I really hadn't heard of before until I started seeing like the trailers pop up, and I saw it popping up on VOD, and it was just a bland excuse of a film. There's a film I can't talk about, which is even worse. But it was a film that was disgusting. It didn't have any fun. Gina Davis is in it and Common's in it. And there was nothing good about this film at all. It didn't excite me. The very first sequence was really bad, and I don't know. I just couldn't get on board with it. Like I said, it's a really bad film, and when having Jessica Chastain in a really bad film doesn't make for a very good time. So that's it's an unfortunate thing, but like I said, there are 9 more films, so at least it isn't the worst film of the year. But it is pretty bad. So Ava at number 10, and number 9 is... Number 9 may be a little bit of a controversy in the simple fact that there are people I know that like this film a lot, But the lead role in the Broken Hearts Gallery, the female character, is so annoying and so ridiculously stupid. I don't even know what was going on in this movie. It just was a terrible mishmash of trying to be humorous and trying to have all these fun characters that weren't fun at all, and trying to have this emotional story about the idea of what happens when we break up with our partner and stuff like that. And I understand what they were going for. I understand, having these characters do what they did and how they react. But there was no chemistry between the leads, in my honest opinion. There was no chemistry at all in any of the characters in this movie. And I just thought the plotting was really bad. I thought the story was really bad. And it just was an awful time. I was bored. I was excruciatingly waiting, checking my phone. And I didn't like this movie at all. So, yeah, it's a shame that this movie stunk as bad as it did. But, yeah, at number 9 is the Broken Hearts Gallery. So we'll head into number 8, which is... So there was a week where during the pandemic I watched two romantic films. One was Words on Bathroom Walls, which I actually really liked. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. It could almost be a passable, entertaining. It's a sad movie, but it's entertaining. But this other film, which I think premiered on Amazon Studios or whatever, Amazon Prime, was Chemical Hearts. And the two main characters, as much as they tried to have that story where somebody has a disability and they play off that disability, the story just completely fell through. I don't know what they were thinking when they made this movie. I know it's probably based off a book or whatever I was talking about, but I didn't feel the chemistry there. I didn't feel like these characters just were poorly written. And it was such a shame to watch because I'm sitting here going, there's just no fun in this story. It's very dour. It's very dark. It's deeply depressing. And it's doing exactly what, like, The Fault in Our Stars and that movie, like I said, with the 5-foot rule or 6-foot rule or whatever it was. And it's another one of those films that's just, maybe it's just not for me. Maybe there's other people that out there enjoy it, which is perfectly all right. But yeah, watching this movie after watching Words on Bathroom Walls, it was a complete 180 of an experience, and it was a pretty bad film. So it's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So at number 8 is Chemical Hearts, and at number 7 we have... So I'm not one to crap on directors. Well, to be fair, I do crap on directors because there are certain directors that I just don't care for very much. Ben Falcone has all the right heart in his place. He's the type of director that really tries to make good films, and he tries to do it with his wife, Melissa McCarthy. But the guy just doesn't... I don't know if it's just him and Melissa McCarthy that are bad luck or what, but Super Intelligence was another film in his repertoire of directing that was god-awful. The movie is terrible. It's not funny. It's not entertaining. You put Bobby Cannavale, who is a very interesting kind of dynamic actor, and you completely misuse him. And then you have James Corden, who's very, very annoying. I love when I think James Corden was in Doctor Who. He was fun in that, but he's gotten to a point where he's overused, kind of like Melissa McCarthy in a lot of sad ways. And I don't like what he's doing. He like Cats and The Prom and stuff like that. I didn't even review The Prom because it was so horrible. But he's just, I don't know, he's just doing his same shtick, and Super Intelligence is just not very good. It's actually pretty terrible. It makes, no use of the interesting kind of idea what they're going with. And, I think Brian Tyree Henry's in this movie, and I'm like, why are you even in this movie? You had such a great performance in If Beale Street Could Talk, and you're in this garbage. Super Intelligence sucks. So anyways, that's my number 7 film for Worst of the Year, and at number 6 we have... So I remember being very, very sad when I put Wrinkle in Time on my Worst of the Year list because I love Ava DuVernay as a director, producer. She's fantastic. She's done some really interesting projects. But the film wasn't good. It was another Disney live adaptation that just didn't work. It was a really strange experience. I refused to review it because I was just going to go off on it. And so when they released Artemis Fowl, which is my number 6 film, it was a completely devastating experience because it was a film I was actually kind of looking forward to. A lot of people were hate watching it. They were just not really into the trailers, which I kind of was. But I watched the movie, I reviewed the movie, and I realized what happened. It was another Wrinkle in Time problem. It was a movie that had a lot of promise but completely fell through. It has a character like Josh Gad, who's doing Hagrid, basically, was really, really stupid. The actors are doing I hate I hate hating on kid actors, but the main character who's playing Artemis Fowl is terrible in this movie. The female fairy character is awful. There's like no real setup. Like it just goes from one plot point to the other without any real kind of structure. And it was just not a very good movie. It was, like I said, it's at number 6 on my list, and it was just a terrible experience. And it's a movie that would have failed at the box office if it weren't for the pandemic. But they put it on Disney Plus, and it got some viewership. But it's a terrible, terrible film, and it's one of those films I deeply regret putting on this list. But it has to go on there because it's just a film that's not very good. So at number 6, unfortunately, is Artemis Fowl. But like I said, we're heading to number 5, which is
Maniacal laugh. Maniacal.
So as we reach the halfway point of the worst films of the year, my number 5 film is a film that's directed by Nat Faxon and, of course, Jim Rash. They, of course, directed the amazing Way, Way Back that got no Oscar love at all, which it should have. And they also won an Oscar, of course, for The Descendants, as well as Jim Rash being in Community. They're fantastic directors. They have a lot of heart in their scripts and stuff like that. So to be safe to say I was excited for Downhill is kind of an understatement. I was really looking forward to it. I liked the trailer. Will Ferrell is playing a dramatic actor in this movie, which is nice to see when comedians do that, like, of course, Jim Carrey and Adam Sandler. And it had Julia Louis-Dreyfus in it and Zach Woods, who I love Zach Woods. He's a fantastic comedian. But my God, this movie is misery in a nutshell. This movie is as miserable as it comes. I absolutely loathe this movie. I didn't have any fun with it. I thought the idea of Will Ferrell and Julia Louis-Dreyfus, who have no chemistry, are completely some of the worst acting I've seen this year. The fact that Will Ferrell leaves his family behind as an avalanche happens, the constant bickering and screaming and yelling, just the nature of the misery that is going on. I'm like, what the hell happened with this film? What were Jim Rash and Nat Faxon thinking when they made this film? And I was I'm getting angry now. I was just I was baffled by what I was watching. And I think it was only like a 90-minute movie. I was like, this is the longest 90 minutes of my life. This was like one of the last films I saw before the pandemic hit, but this was a terrible, terrible film, and it should have been higher on my list, but there's a lot of more worse films we're going to talk about. But yeah, this movie is awful, it's not fun, and it's one of the worst films I've seen this year, and it's such a shame for two directors that I still look forward to seeing their films, but right now this is a speed bump in their career. So unfortunately, number 5 was a film I was looking forward to, which is Downhill, and that's it. We'll go ahead and head to number 4, which is... So Tim Hunter, as a director, he hasn't directed a lot of stuff, but The River's Edge was a film that I really enjoyed. It's dark and disturbing. It has Crispin Glover. It's a really strange movie, but it was a film that I really enjoyed for when it came out, like in the 80s or 90s or whatever it was. And so he is officially coming back to do a horror film, and he has Bret Easton Ellis writing the script, who of course did like Rules of Attraction and American Psycho and stuff like that. And they brought back Crispin Glover, and it felt like a movie that was going to be kind of like an 80s style horror film. And that, of course, is Smiley Face Killers, which is number 4 on my list. And boy, this was not a good film. I don't even care how violent this movie got, how graphic this movie got. This movie was just full of mentally insane people that did really stupid things. The main lead characters are completely inept in what they're doing, and I don't know what Bret Easton Ellis was thinking with this script. I don't know who he thought would like this film, and there are people that like this film, which I'm not gonna hate on them for it. But this film, like from start to finish, I was so bad. Like with Downhill, I was just so baffled by what was even going on. I'm like, this is a year of just terrible films by directors that I actually really have interest in watching. And just like when it gets to the end of this film, where it eventually goes with like the Crispin Glover character and the main character, the payoff is just so bad. And then it's based off like the smiley face murder situation or whatever. And I could not get on board at all with this film. I was so sad because I watched this during one of the festivals that came later on near Halloween, and even Crispin Glover just feels misused in this movie. So it was such a downtrodden film and such a downbeat moment of the year for me that I had to put that on the list. So it's really high on the list. It's one of the worst films I've seen this year. It's one of the worst horror films I've seen in quite a while, since Slender Man. But yeah, it's pretty bad. So that's it. That's Smiley Face Killers at number 4, and we'll head to number 3, which is... So here's a film that I just watched, I just reviewed as the recording of this video, and that film is a film that I thought the trailer was interesting, but a lot of people were not enjoying what they were seeing. They were really kind of upset by what the producer Michael Bay and the director and the cast were involved with. And then this movie had Bradley Whitford in it as well, and I'm like, oh my god, what is happening? And that, of course, that movie is Songbird. This movie's complete trash. It really is. It's not good. It's not entertaining. It has terrible acting in it. The concepts, the ideas, the motivations, everything about this movie just feels haphazardly done. It's dealing with the pandemic, which, you know, The Stand is officially releasing as of this recording. There's been a couple episodes. And I just don't think it was a good year to release this film. You know, I don't think it was a good year to release The Stand either. And Songbird is just a complete madhouse of nonsense. And, oh my God, the acting in this movie with, you know, Alexander Daddario and the lead actors who play the two main leads, and I don't know what happened with this film, but this film is complete utter trash. It really is. It's not good. And I know there are people that like this film. Once again, I've seen it in my comments, but it's not just the fact that like the immune thing is just why? What is what is this film? Why did this happen? And then all I could think of was Michael Bay produced it. So that's all you need to know. If you enjoy this film, I'm happy for you, but why do you like this film? It's amazing how this is not the worst film of the year, but there's a couple other films that, you know, the beginning of the year was not good. So at number 3 is Songbird, which is terrible. So anyways, at number 2 is... So 1 and 2 could flip-flop depending on what you think, you know, depending on my day of logic. I actually had this one at number 1 for quite a while. Andrea Riseborough is in one of my favorite films of the year. If you know what film I'm talking about, you know I really love that film. But she was also in I don't know if it was a sequel or a reboot or remake. I can't remember anymore because it's been so long since I've seen the film. But she was in The Grudge, which I think Damien Bashir was in as well. And I remember just like watching this film, and I remember going to AMC using my A-list Stubbs card. We were on the edge of the pandemic, so it was, you know, watching a movie in the theater was not a big thing. And I remember walking out of this movie going, holy God, this is January. This is the first film to release in January. And I said to myself as I was getting ready to record my video, this is going to be one of the worst films I've seen this year. And it stayed in my top 10 list. To be fair, it's been a crazy year with the pandemic, but this film was always going to be in my top 10 worst of the year, high up like in the number 1 or 2 spot. And it was an awful film. It had no concept of logic. It had no concept of realism. I think John Cho was in this movie as well, if I remember right. This is like how far I forgot about this film. But John Cho was like in a flashback scene. It was complete utter nonsense. Like this was worse than Rings, that like when they spread around with the computer program or whatever. Like I don't know what the hell they were thinking with this movie. This movie sucks. I don't even want to talk about this movie anymore. This is like, put this in the Slenderman bio or something. I'm gonna light a match with one. You know, 20 years from now, I'm gonna put all the crappy movies and light a match. But that's not the worst film of the year, which is you should know which the worst film of the year if you know my rants of this year. But yeah, The Grudge is still an awful film. So at number 2 is The Grudge, which was the first film that came out in 2020. But there we go. We are going into the worst film of the year, which I will definitely put on the pile of Slenderman. I joke with The Grudge, but it probably could go there. But this film at number 1 is on the pile of Slenderman. So at number 1 we have... So, we've all heard of The Turning of the Screw. You know which film I'm talking about. We've heard of The Turning of the Screw, or The Turn of the Screw. We know it's been adapted into many, many movies. It's a well-worn, well-versed, well-liked book that deals with ghosts and hauntings and stuff like that. And so this film, which, of course, is The Turning, is a film that I was actually kind of interested in from watching the trailers. It was creepy, it was spooky, it was interesting. It has Mackenzie Davis, who's a fantastic actress. She's an actress that is going to have a great career at some point. And it had like Finn Wolfhard and Brooklyn Prince in it as the son and as the kids. And the movie, as I was watching it, I realized
I've made a huge mistake.
Even getting a A-list ticket for this movie, because I don't know what happened. I don't know what the director was thinking. I don't even remember the director, to be honest. I don't know if they were smoking weed. I don't know if they thought they could outbeat Slender Man. I don't know what the F happened with this movie. But as we all know, there's a very famous moment in this movie where it just kind of ends. Like, there's a point, I'm not even worried about spoiling anymore. There's a point where Mackenzie Davis, she's like freaking out. She's starting to like lose her sanity or something like that. And all of a sudden it just like shifts from a certain scenario with Brooklyn Prince and Finn Wolfhard. And all of a sudden she's like in the pool area that we see in a lot of points in the movie. I think it's like in the insane asylum where it's her mother's at. And I think it's her mother is never really explained, but her mother's drawing on the floor, and we kind of see Mackenzie Davis scream, and then it just cuts to credits, and I was like, what? And the credits run, and I'm sitting here going, what? And I'm in my car going home, and I'm like, what?
What the hell was that?
I'm like, what the F just happened? I'm like, did this really just end this way? Did this movie just do what I think it did, where it had like no legit ending? And there are people that have watched this movie that say, you know, I'm fine with the ending. What?
What are you people? On dope?
How are you fine with this ending? How are you fine with any portion? This movie it has no logical sense to it.
That don't make no sense.
It's as bad as Slender Man. It's a movie that is so completely nonsensical and just bonkers ridiculous that it just feels like a waste of time and waste of space. Like, my blood boils when I think about this movie. I'm going to be so glad when 2021 hits and I don't have to think about this stupid effing movie anymore. The Turning is one of the worst films I've ever seen. It's the worst film of the year. It deserves the worst film of the year. And thank God Mackenzie Davis was the happiest season and that she's done much, much better films before and since, because this is a film I hope she's embarrassed by. I hope everyone that worked on this film is embarrassed by. And yeah, it's god awful. It's the worst film of the year, and I hope it gets put out the pasture and shot. So anyways, number one is The Turning. I know most of you probably agree with me as it being one of the worst films of the year. But that's my top 10 worst films of the year. Like I said, I was surprised I was able to get top 10. But like I said, there was Super Intelligence actually made my top 10, so that actually filled it out. So, but that's it. That's my take on the worst films of 2020. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what you think is the worst film of the year. What have you watched in 2020, even with the pandemic, that you think is legitimately the worst film of the year? Like I said, if it's The Turning, thank you. If it's something else, let me know in the comments. So, but anyways, if you like what you see on my channel, hit the subscribe button to join Movie Emporium. Hit that notification bell at the top to find out what's coming next. If you like this video, awesome. Hit that like button, and we'll see you on the next video, which is the best of 2020. Peace out.